you all so much for coming this morning, 11 a.m. for Theater Folk. It's crack of dawn, so I appreciate you all being here. I am Colin Mitchell, the editor-in-chief of Bitter Lemons. They're sponsoring this panel, and hope you all filled up with coffee and bagels. Very good. Thank you all to these wonderful people for coming out here, taking the time to be here and talk about theater criticism. I'm going to dive right in here. I'm going to introduce everybody. Oh, by all means, throw things in the crowd. And projectiles are needed. And if you throw fruits and vegetables, we'll make a nice salad out of it. So let me just dive right in here and introduce these wonderful people, and then we'll kind of get going. There'll be, here's what I'm going to do. This is, I probably shouldn't do this because it'll come back and haunt me, but I'm going to give you my phone number, and you can text me secret questions throughout this as we're talking to everybody. And there will be time at the end. We'll give some time for Q&A with everybody here, so save up your questions there. But my number is 323-253-3887. But they're writing it down too.
Yes. Heckling.
Now I'm in trouble. Okay, so let's get started here. And the title, if you will, and theme of the panel today is the purpose of theater criticism in the 21st century, which I think is kind of sums it all up. So, who do we have here today? We have Margaret Gray, who is a freelance writer, has been contributing theater reviews and features to the LA Times since 2010. She has an MFA from the Yale School of Drama and an MA in fiction from Johns Hopkins University. She is the author of 2 books for young readers, The Ugly Princess and The Wise Fool, and The Lovesick Salesman, published by Henry Holt, and she is the mother of 3 children. We have second from last down there, Anthony Burns is a critic, educator, producer, and arts administrator based in Los Angeles. He has served as the founding artistic director of Burning Wheel and the Umbrella Company, weekly columnist on KCRW, director of cultural relations for the University of Southern California, and associate producer of new play development for Center Theater Group. During his time at CTG, Anthony led the renovation of the Kirk Douglas Theater and Ivy Substation. He has produced over 100 new works for the American Theater. He holds an MFA from Cal Arts and currently teaches at the Los Angeles County High School for the Arts. And next to Margaret, we have Terry Morgan, has been reviewing theater in Los Angeles for the past 16 years for such publications as Variety, LA Weekly, and Backstage West. Terry now writes for reviews for LAist.com and is currently the president of the Los Angeles Drama Critics Circle. At the very end there, dealing with traffic problems on the way in, but made it. Thank you, Tony. Tony Frankel is a graduate of the CSUN Theater Department. He has since worked in the theater as a director, casting director, producer, and teacher. He sight reads piano and his work. Wow, really? He sight reads piano and has worked as a music director and accompanist, helping performers to develop cabaret acts. We'll talk later. As an actor, he has appeared in over 70 productions. After writing for Backstage, he turned to theater criticism in 2010, becoming critic at large of Stage and Cinema, for which he is now editor-in-chief. Stage and Cinema critiques theater, film, music, dance, concerts, etc. around the country, and currently has over 30 writers contributing to the site. Aside from the arts, Tony has been a community activist, and being a national parks fanatic, has experienced 307 of 394 U.S. national parks. Next to Anthony is Ramona Pilar Gonzalez. She is a writer, performer. Oh, hey, brought the fan club. Very nice. Is a writer, performer, and native Californian. She has written and produced one-act plays, short plays, and films. Her dramatized essay, Del Plato a la Boca, El Ritmo Te Toca. Is that right? Received a grant from La Plaza de Cultura y Artes Foundation. She is a founding member of the theater performance group Tongue in Cheek. Oh, I see. You have to see it. It's Chicana.
Yeah.
She has performed with the Bilingual Foundation for the Arts, Casa 0101, Cornerstone Theater Company, the Denver Center Theater, and East Los Angeles Repertory Theater Company. Ramona writes and sings for the band Minions. Minions? Cool name. She's an editor-in-chief for Playwriting in the City and the Revista magazine. Ramona has a BA in Film and Cultural Representation from UC Davis and an MFA in Creative Writing from Antioch University, Los Angeles. Thank you, Ramona. And last but not least, next to Ramona is Bill Radin. Bill Radin has reviewed and written about theater on both coasts over the past 25 years and is a member of the Gunfighter Nation Playwrights Group. His stage reviews and articles can currently be found in the LA Weekly. All right, so let's dive right into this. Here's my first question for you guys. I'd like each one of you to answer it, please. Why should myself or anyone here or anyone who listens to this recording, why should they listen to anything that any of you have to say about it? I mean, what makes you so special? Margaret?
They're starting with me, okay. Well, I think that every theater critic probably has to struggle with just that question. Why should anybody listen to what I have to say? Why are my opinions more valid, more publishable than anybody else's? And I don't know that I've satisfactorily answered that question for myself. I can say that I think that in a culture, the function of a critic is almost to kind of acknowledge the value in the culture of whatever art form is being criticized. So assigning somebody the role of being a critic is a way to acknowledge the importance of theater, for example. And so, being in that position is a responsibility, requires me to be responsible to a lot of things, more than just my own opinion. The context, the culture, the history of the theater. And so I think that just the struggle to acknowledge all those things and be fair to all those things can, if I do it well, which is still, up for grabs, but it could make my work something that contributes to the theater community in a way. So that's
Right. But you write for the LA Times, so, I mean, which is the most prestigious paper in Los Angeles. So do you feel that your obligation is even greater because of that, or?
I feel a lot of pressure because of that. Sure. I mean, I feel that I have to step back a little bit from. I think. Yeah, I do. I feel a lot of pressure because of that, and I don't know. I mean, I think that everybody is savvy enough to realize that any critic is just one person, and it's just one person's opinion. The fact that it's been ratified by an established paper like that can obviously give it more heft. So I have that it's almost on my side, I guess.
Right.
That helps me out because just being inside that paper, although on the back page or whatever.
Does it alter how, I mean, obviously you have editors and stuff that are editorial oversight, but does it alter the way that you write, knowing that there's this LA Times audience? Would you write differently if it was just a personal blog or?
Definitely. Yeah, I think I would definitely write differently if it were my own. I mean, I might be a little bit more irreverent. I might probably be more sarcastic and maybe silly. I try to be more.
They don't allow you to be silly at the LA Times?
Sometimes I am, unwittingly silly. I don't think. I think they they send me out there and they let me pretty much say whatever I want to say. I don't think they're gonna. I mean, they might, if I was excessively silly, they might rein me in somehow or ask me to look at it again. But I definitely try to be responsible and respectful. I think I might be less respectful if I was talking in the bathroom to somebody during the intermission.
That's how I look at it. Whenever I write at Bitter Lemons, I just pretend I'm in my bathroom. I usually freeze me.
I suppose I could try to be more loosey and out there. No, don't do that.
All right, cool. Well, Terry, what do you think? Why the hell should we be listening to you?
Well, there's no specific reason. I mean, I don't think that anybody automatically you should be listening to them regardless of where they're writing, or I think it all ends up being individual. I mean, you have to look at somebody's stuff and then see whether it works for you. It doesn't matter who they're writing for. whether it's a blog, whether it's the biggest paper in town, whatever. That every critic is going to be put under that particular, scrutiny. I think ultimately it just has to be, does it work for you? Do you think this is somebody that you see a show based on something they recommended, and does it make any sense to you what they said? Is their writing any good? Do you agree more or less with how they're doing it? I think that's pretty much it. That's the only way you can figure it out. It doesn't really matter where they're doing it, it just matters how they're doing it, I think. And the only way to find out is by going to see the shows and seeing whether that has utility for you.
Right. Bill, what do you think?
Well, I mean, I would flip the question around, and why am I drawn to any critic? And I think it's a matter of, well, one, they have seen the work, and I haven't, and that's what I'm looking for, is a judgment on whether I should waste my money and my time, and why that particular critic, because that, of course, boils down to a matter of taste, temperament, and sensibility, and that is just something that is expressed, and whether that resonates with mine. In my case, I'm a college-educated white boy from the suburbs, so that's sort of my audience, right? That's who I assume I'm writing for, and people with my similar life experiences and background, and also because any review is an argument. It's an argument on why my opinion is relevant, and of course the argument on why you should go to any particular show. And so that sort of speaks to, again, the depth of any particular critic's experience out there. His sort of his erudition, his intelligence, his sensibility. And
It's a pretty ballsy thing to be a critic, though, I think. I mean, do you feel that way? I mean, as you say, it's an argument. Who's it an argument with?
On one hand, you are arguing with the reader that your opinion has a validity, and that's sort of expressed in your style and the erudition that comes out in your review, how elegantly it's expressed, how entertainingly, because that becomes convincing, that in its own right, that what you're saying is actually, if you're a sharp writer, the chances are, your opinion is sharp. Now, after you go and see the show, and you see that, no, this guy is completely out to lunch, that gives you a point of reference for the future. To never trust, or, my girlfriend used to say this about Rex Reed, anything he hated, she would automatically go and see. Because and that also speaks to something about a critic. Be consistent. Because even, I don't have to agree with you, but you are communicating.
Yeah, and would you think, consistent, I agree with that, I think it's a very important thing. And I think, would you say that honesty is very important?
That's a very broad term, honesty. That's a good question. There is a implicit, contract with the reader that you have that there isn't a conflict of interest, that yours is an objective opinion in the sense that you have no connection with the company, you have no ulterior motive other than the sort of aesthetic agenda, your vision of what theater should be. So as a writer, you are being honest, you are being true to that, and I think that's what the honesty is in that kind of criticism.
Yeah. Ramona, what do you think? Why should we be reading your stuff?
I'm from LA. I was raised in LA, and just speaking of theater criticism specifically within LA, I am part of the community that is consuming this production. Whether I'm going in to critique it or whether I'm going to watch it, I'm part of a community that is going to see this production. And so my opinion matters. And I don't see it necessarily represented in the larger sort of publications. And so what
the founding editor of Playwriting in the City, Fanny, and myself aim to do is to add to the conversation, our point of view, because it's an interesting thing to be from Los Angeles and see Los Angeles defined by people who maybe move here from other states. And so part of what I do with theater criticism is to kind of, I'll go to the taper and I'll see something and I have an opinion about it. You know, when artistic directors are planning their season, they obviously want people to come see the show. So they ideally are taking into consideration what the community needs or what the community could benefit from. And a lot of what I've seen at like larger run theaters, there's a disconnect from what my daily life is, what my community's daily life is, and there's a disconnect, so I think it's important to acknowledge it and talk about it. And so that's why it's what I say is important, because.
So you think you bring that perspective?
Yes, absolutely.
Anthony, what do you think?
I'm confused. I'm confused. I mean, I guess part of the question, right, packed inside of this is this notion of authority or how we define criticism. I love what you said about sort of starting a conversation. I'm not sure that this notion of critic as stamp of approval or critic as here's what this thing is and let me define it and let me tell you how you should feel about it, I don't know that that's really a useful notion, especially in this community. To me, I mean, at least for me, and you know, I think I at least feel a sort of different responsibility because somebody isn't flipping to my page like I'm invading your car probably during rush hour traffic, whether you wanted to hear about theater or not. So I sort of feel like part of my responsibility is to the theater and part of my responsibility is to be a good conversation partner for 3.5 minutes, even if you're not at all interested in the theater. So I don't really feel like I'm existing in a way where to pass judgment or to put stars on something is really as important as it is to have people to engage and begin a conversation. And I guess I wonder what the forum for that level of dialogue would be. You know, because I think part of people's frustration, and I know certainly my frustration with critics, is that I think we have an expectation that they're going to do like 5 or 6 different things, and we get in trouble when we conflate those things. Some of it is, I want you to speak to the theater community and to tell us what is good, what is wrong, and to champion those things which you like, and to correct those things or whatever this. And I think we forget that that might be a kind of inside baseball conversation. To me, I'm not sure where or if that conversation is happening. I'd love to see it happen. And then on the flip side, we have this kind of much more general, hey, just get the word out. You know, just tell people that this is happening. And I think those two things are often at war, which is why this sort of question of like, why should you listen to me? Well, it really has to do with what you're looking for in it. Was that suitably oblique?
What was the middle part? Thank you. Tony, what do you think?
You know, it's interesting. Who are you that I'm talking to, and why, dependent upon the year that you would have asked me this question. Jeff and I saw All About Eve the other night at the Los Angeles Theater. And at the very beginning, as the acid-tongued critic Addison DeWitt is going over everybody, this is a playwright, and as you know, playwrights do this and this. This is an actor, and being an actor, he'll talk. And he's describing in detail all these parts of the theater, and when it comes to him, he says, I am a critic and commentator, I am essential to the theater.
That's it?
That's your basic answer. But essential to whom? Now, if you have a column like Addison DeWitt, as we used to have columns, there's a gossipy sort of head-a-hopperish thing that some critics would cross the line as gossips and like to be venomous, and it was sort of a game. But at what I'm discovering, at least 80% of the readers at Stage and Cinema are associated with the shows. And that's why Backstage cited one of the reasons they decided to not have writers anymore is they didn't have an audience outside of people in the shows and actors that were basically looking for pull quotes. That's not who I'm speaking to. So it's not my job to be a show doctor. It certainly is not my job to be PR, which is more and more becoming the reason why a lot of these blog sites are starting up, is reviewers are basically becoming free press because they get their tickets for free because there will not be a lot of payment for critics in the future. There is a list I brought, which I will be going over with you, about Harold Clurman's qualifications of a critic. And it's very short, but this is what I agree with all 12 of these things.
We'll get to those in a second.
Okay, it's short, but we'll get to that in a second. I think validity. I absolutely believe honesty. The truth shall set you free. And so this isn't something about necessarily perception. I think a critic's job is to report back from the battlefield with accuracy and clarity. And then the reader can decide based on that, even if I don't necessarily recommend it. They may even want to go see it, like the Rex Reed example. But I don't know any great explanation. I'm essential to the theater.
Good, and guys, anytime you want to jump in, anyone saying anything, this is not just this could be a discussion, so feel free to do that. Okay, actually a little question just came in here for Anthony. Someone asked, do you consider yourself a, all right, hold on. Do you consider yourself a radio commentator first and critic second?
Yeah, I mean, that's the nomenclature of KCRW, that we're columnists, not critics. But yeah, because I mean, I take the greater responsibility I'm more interested in having people who aren't planning on going to the theater and who maybe aren't even planning on going to the show I'm reviewing recognize that theater is going on and that maybe there's something interesting there, right? And so I'm sort of, I'd like to think of myself as the gateway drug to theater. That, maybe I'm the thing that after hearing it 5 or 6 times, then they think about it. That would at least be my hope. And in terms of the people I'm trying to speak to or trying to write for, are people who aren't planning on going to the theater. Those would be the people that I'd be interested in sort of reaching.
Right. And this is for anyone along those lines. So do you guys think of yourselves as having the theater critic, do they have an obligation to the audience or to the art form? Both?
Yeah, absolutely.
Does one supersede
How are they
the other?
different?
How are they different?
I mean, how can you separate? I mean, isn't this part of our challenge? Isn't whether it's us and talking about who's reading or listening or whatever to our stuff, we're all talking about audience, right? And the deal with theater, right, is you have to be present and we have to be present in the same place. It's not a novel, you can write Ulysses, it can sit on the shelf and it can be genius. So how do we separate, if we're separating the audience from the art form, aren't we doing a different art form?
No, I don't think so. I think it's fairly clear. I mean, I think you can make your argument, but I don't think generally that audiences consider themselves part of the play. I do feel like when I'm trying to write a review, I am trying to hit a bunch of different things. And depending on what the show is, it may be a different kind of review for each show. But I do think you're always trying to hit both. Is this something that you think somebody would enjoy seeing or appreciate seeing? Does it work artistically? Is it succeeding in its goals? And I think you're speaking both to the people who are doing the show and somebody who might want to go see the show. And I think that's for every single review you do. So I do think it's both.
I think it's both in another sense as well. I mean, how can you separate the audience from the theater? I mean, they are, both in the sense that Anthony is talking about, but also, in terms of the future of theater. One of the crises we are facing now is that, especially in LA theater, we're facing big trouble. The regional CTG, the subscriber-based houses are chasing their subscribers into the grave. It is the graying of the theater audience, and the future of those models is being directly threatened. What happens when those people die? Who's replacing them? So I think one of the things that one of the responsibilities that has devolved on the critic is to separate, to underscore the good stuff, warn people against the bad stuff, just to sort of preserve what audience there is, and hopefully, to sort of feel the way towards a kind of theater that is relevant to new audiences.
Well, it's interesting because some people I've spoken to, since we're kind of these we've become this Theater London's become this sort of gatekeeper of theater criticism, almost by accident, at least here in LA. A lot of people say, and these are younger theater artists, they say, I know that theater criticism is important, but I don't know why. Because they get all of their information and recommendations from their own little networks, their Facebook networks, their Twitter networks, their social media, their texters, because they have within their, Fred, Jack, and Susan are the ones who I know know a lot about theater. So if I'm going to see a theater thing, I'll ask Fred, Jack, and Susan.
But isn't that the same thing? I mean, they're just basically, they're skipping the middleman. Their friends have become their theater critics.
I agree. So what's the point of you guys anymore?
I would actually disagree with that. To a certain extent, I mean, you have your experience of these people that you talk to. I have my experience having, worked on productions and written productions, and we always, over on the east side, we always want critics to come see us in reviews. We always want to see, us being represented in the, Times, the Weekly, all that stuff. And because at the very least, from a personal point of view, if I'm putting all this work into something, I have this idea, I have this thing that I want to communicate, and a critic is a good way to see whether or not I was successful at that. Did my message come across? And if it didn't, what can they point out that I can take with me and, okay, I'm going to take this information with the next thing that I work on. Because, if we're in a university setting, you have, you do the work and somebody grades you and you kind of know, okay, this is something I need to work on next time. After that's done, you kind of have to gauge, how do I continue to improve? Sometimes you can trust your friends, sometimes you can't. But for the most part, I see a lot of value in criticism because of that, because they're analyzing this, they're analyzing everything about it. We are analyzing everything about it. So I know personally, I tend to read and value criticism, and I also know a lot of my colleagues and contemporaries do. They value it highly when they can get it.
Also, there's always been word of mouth. I mean, people didn't have Facebook.
I'm sorry, Margaret, could you speak just a little
Oh,
louder? 'Cause
sorry.
I'm-
Yeah, sorry.
Okay.
Quiet, please. There's always been word of mouth. There's always been recommendations that you get from your friends. That's part of what makes a theatrical community vibrant. You want people to be talking about the play. That's a good thing. I mean, you want your friends to be telling you, "There, I saw the greatest thing." That doesn't obviate the role of the critic. That doesn't make the critic invalid. There's two separate functions in a way. And I think getting a Facebook or a tweet from your friend, "You got to go see this thing. Joe's in it. He's phenomenal." That's one way of getting. But then also the critic, I mean, it's more of like a formal, almost a record of what happened. Theater is an ephemeral form, and so sometimes if you're studying theatrical history, the only thing you have to go on is the review. You weren't there. Nobody who's alive was there, so you have to.
Yeah, I that's one of the things. That's usually my response to these people. I say, look, yeah, it's ephemeral. It happens this one moment, and these theater critics who we hope are better writers than the regular people, or better communicators, they are the witnesses and historians for these moments in time. And that's a big deal, because you would never know about these amazing shows from the 1920s and 30s and the Barrymores and all these people unless you go back through and read these critics. This is what happened this year.
That's absolutely true. Also, to what you were asking before, I think you're right. What you're saying is that there's always been word of mouth, and people are always going to go say, "Hey, my friend's in this thing," or whatever. You should go see it, which is great. And that's word of mouth. Often is one of the best ways of a show to get an audience. But I think theater criticism exists to some degree for people who are seeking it out. And so that's why it's not, when you were asking I guess your initial question was something along the lines of, does this, you know, if the younger generation, what is the point of theater criticism for them if they're not, what is theater criticism they're asking? It's something that, you know, if you don't search for it, it's not going to have utility, but I think that is what theater criticism is for, is for somebody who actually wants to know. You have to have that initial desire to want to know about a show. So that is, you know, that's the difference.
That's a good point, and I have a question on that. That may be, because they, you know, they had what was it, the big show in New York that they didn't even let reviewers in. Pacino was in, and it did amazing.
Pacino was in Spider-Man?
Pacino was in Spider-Man. Little cameo?
No.
Nice.
Isn't it Quatermain
The Green
Goblins?
Goblin. But they just didn't have reviewers in there, and they did amazing business, and they kind of said, why should we invite you? Because we've got people are coming to see the show, and you know, there was a big brouhaha, a lot of the critics were like,
Right, because they
Put
see us as press reps, as helping be promotion. And in a world of Facebook, and everything is about promoting our lives, and we should not be hearing from most of the people that are promoting their lives, is that it drowns out what I stand for as a critic for the art form and the audience, which is I'm holding them to a higher standard. And I think many Americans don't want to hear it. Because a higher standard means harder work and bigger vision and taking bigger risks. In ancient Greece, the Cynicians was a philosophical group of people that would sit around the marketplace decrying materialism and the way that people consumed and the way that people looked at life, yapping out loud to people on the corner, and they were called Cynicians because the root word is dog, like they were barking at people. But now when you look up the word cynic, you see negative, morose. See what I mean? So people, when they hear something that may be true, like should we really invade Iraq when they haven't done anything to us? People say you're unpatriotic at the time to me.
Margaret, you were about to respond to that.
Oh, well, not specifically to that. It was more about Spider-Man and how I think that was that production had a huge amount of money poured into it and a huge amount of, numbers. That's not going to happen if some 99-seat theater says, we're not letting your viewers in. It's not going to be a big draw. Nobody's going to be bursting, that's just not
Because of
going to be.
the difference in the levels of
Just,
production.
well, yeah, I think that I don't think anybody would be rushing down here to the Open Fist to see a production if they announce we're not letting anybody in, it's gonna be a top secret. I don't think that would happen. Do you think that would happen?
It might. I mean, because, one of the ways you get audiences in Los Angeles, in any performing arts, is you make it an event. And sometimes by making it exclusive, you created an event and people just want to come and see it. Spectacle and an event are some of the things that get the biggest audience in Los Angeles.
Well, I welcome them to try it. I mean, I think that'd be, if it works, go for it. But I mean, I just don't know. I mean, Spider-Man ultimately had to close, remember?
Yes.
Scandalous manner, so.
All right, here's a question for everybody along these lines. Someone asked, what about standards? Do we want social networks? You talked about this. What about standards? Do we want social networks setting standards? Would Walter Kerr or Martin Bernstein been made irrelevant if social media was around?
I don't think so. I mean, I think when you initially asked me this panel and the name of it was, what is the purpose of theater criticism in the 21st century? I don't think the purpose has changed, but the delivery method has. We have a lot more delivery methods now. It's sort of democratized in some ways, but I don't think that, say, Walter Kerr or somebody like that, it wouldn't be any different. There would still be a use for them. It's just that you might not see them and find them as easily because, theatrical criticism is being cut out of most papers and so on and so you have to search for somebody that you actually like their writing, that you trust them, so on and so forth. It's more difficult for that because there's so many more people to look at. And back in the day, you might look at when Walter Kerr was writing, there was 3 or 4 papers or something running at any given time, and there might be one critic at each one. There were 3 people to look at, or something like that, and there was nobody else, right? Those were the 3 people you could go to, so it was very easy to find him.
So it's more of a glut.
Well, it's just now it's great in one way, and that if you want to read a lot of different people, you have that option. But on the other hand, you have to go through that many different people and go, well, I don't know, because there's so many different voices saying this is great, this is not. But I think that's the thing. It doesn't detract from the value of the individual critic, but it does make it more tricky to figure out which one that you want to, possibly believe or whatever.
Well, that's a good, one of my questions too, is that you were talking about, the theater criticism is for those who are seeking it out. So, but if no one's seeking it out, or if less people are seeking it out, is it your job as a theater critic? Do you need to be finding new ways to reach them, or is that your job at all? Should theater critics be marketing themselves to make themselves
I don't think
relevant?
so. I mean, certainly somebody can if they want to, and people will. I don't think it's a defining part of the gig, as it were. I mean, basically, I think what a theater critic is at heart is somebody who has an opinion about theater and feels like expressing it, and hopefully does it in a way that can get through to other people and is, intelligible and hopefully useful in some way. I don't think there's, I'm sorry, your question again was?
Well, it's all right. It's if people aren't seeking you out, is it your job to be seeking them out?
No, I don't think so. I don't believe so. I mean, like I said, you certainly can try to get that publicity. I don't think that's part of it at all. What is the purpose of that, really? I mean,
It depends on whether or not you want to make money.
well, what money
Because
is there
the
in theater
future
criticism?
of print is going to be gone.
Have some, I don't.
Okay? It will be gone. And when it's gone, a lot of the websites are not going to pay anybody anymore.
They're not
Because
paying
in
them
order
now.
to, they're not paying now. Huffington Post doesn't pay their writers, and they sold for $350 million. So what I'm finding is people, the critics that are emerging as a result of the internet tend to favor or be positive in their reviews because they believe that's what they need to continue
Because
getting.
they don't get paid and they want the free ticket.
Right, and some, like Examiner.com, they'll actually write a review that's more positive because they know that 80% of the people that come are from the show, and they're the ones that are gonna click on it. Every time they get a click, they get 4 cents. 0.04 cents, I think it is, something like that. So as theater becomes more of a commerce, so may criticism. So if you wanna hold to your guns and just do this for the love of theater, that's great, but someone like me, because a lot of people are starting their own websites and they're finding out that they're working 70 hours a week just to keep it up. And then people say, well, Tony, what about Facebook? What about Twitter? What about sleep or taking a shower? So what's happening is if you want to have a well-written critique, which could take up to 6 hours, and edit other people's work and make it look good, and just have integrity and high standards for the website, what are we going to do for social media? That's why Broadway.com, Talkin' Broadway, hire people full-time to post all day long. Links within dummy sites, within search engine optimization, paying Google. Criticism has become a numbers game, not integral to the theater anymore as a conversation. We're being edged out by the Yelp, YouTube generation because artistic directors and PR are seeing if they can do the work. Why should they give away one ticket when their audience can sell their show for them?
I don't necessarily disagree with that, but we're talking about theater criticism in an established sort of organization, where some of you are getting paid to do stuff and to do this theater criticism, and that's amazing. That blows my mind. You know what I mean? But underneath that sort of echelon of things, there's still the idea that I like me personally, but other people in this particular Los Angeles community have an opinion about what's going on here, and we need to have a venue to say it, and we can do it well. I have degrees. 3 of the staff, most of the staff, all the staff writers on playwriting in the city have degrees. Like 3 or 4 of us have master's degrees. One of us is getting a second master's degree. So we're well educated. We understand the theater community in Los Angeles because we've been here for so long looking at it. So it's like, we don't have the benefit of the LA Times, website to promote or to have our opinion even on there. The benefit of something established like the LA Times, the LA Weekly is like people can be scrolling through stuff and hit upon a review and be like, okay, good, there's there. At least it's there. As opposed to us, we do have to promote because otherwise, who's going to even know that we're there? And it's important that we're there because we added the conversation, at least in Los Angeles theater criticism. I can't speak to the nation, but so.
Well, to me, I don't review LA theater. I review theater. And if I review theater in LA, I can say, well, compared to the production that was done in the Fountain, but since I review Chicago, San Francisco, San Diego, it's not really about the theater. It's just about what's right in front of you on that stage. So I don't think a critic's job is to promote on any level. And that's what the internet is about, promotion. Most of what I see is about self-promotion. And so it's getting stickier for that kind of opinion. Also, we have to ask ourselves, do people want to read? Do people actually want to sit down and read a review? I've even asked for people for help who are editors and said, my God, please, I need help. I'm publishing 25 reviews this week. Could you help me edit? And they look over it, but I can tell because sometimes I'll actually insert grammatically incorrect words. They remain. Because now people skim, like Evelyn Wood's speed reading. When they read, they don't really actually read a lot of them. And so we're also up against the audience of, are we going to be timeout in LA Weekly reviews, which are 150 or 200 words? Can you really say what you want to say? So the people that are coming to Stage and Cinema are saying, I'm not allowed to say what I want to say. My editors cut out negativity. LA Times can be slanted. There's all these different reasons I hear that people are not able to tell the truth. So you finally get online and you do get to tell the truth, you're going to limit your audience. Because people just want to know, did you like it or did you not like it? I hear all the time, it's a
You don't
thumbs
think
up
the
or
audience
thumbs down.
wants the truth?
I think they want it fast if they want it. But no, I don't think America wants the
They
truth.
want fast truth.
The audience is made up of Americans, and I personally don't think Americans really want the truth right now.
Anthony?
Okay, we're dealing with a lot of monoliths here. The truth, as if any one of us suddenly has some, I uniquely hold the truth about theater, or the notion of a critic is a single idea. I think what we're at is we're at the intersection of two art forms that are in crisis, right? You have criticism on one hand, and criticism in this country as represented by major newspapers and major publications, right? All of us understand how that's radically shifting, how that's being democratized in a way that is both tremendously exciting and tremendously frightening in a variety of ways, right? The same thing's going on in academia with these major online courses, right? And we don't really understand what the impact of that is, and we're at the infancy of that. At the same time, we have a theater community that, as folks are saying, right, at the major regional theaters, the audience dies off 10% a year, right? So we have two things that are at this moment of crisis in relationship to audience. But I think the notion that there is a single truth, or that there's a single right way to do this, or that there's a single answer is part of the problem. And it seems to me that for both theater and criticism, both of which I think will outlive the internet and any of these crises, the connection needs to be with the audience, right? And there's certainly room to have the sensibility of, okay, I'm putting this up, the audience comes to me. That can be one answer. And then someone else can go out and grab that audience, right? So there can be a variety of different answers to this. I think we just get caught in a cul-de-sac when we start thinking about singular truth or singular critic.
I mean, if I had to predict, I would probably say that in 20 years from now, personal branding as far as criticism goes is going to be probably a big trend, and yes, and critics will be on Facebook and Twitter and whatever, Pinterest, or whatever page exists, and be plugging into these social distribution networks and tied into the promotion of shows or whatever in a much more intimate way than is happening now. Just to avoid this situation that is developing in the blogosphere, where unlike, Anthony Burns, who is still speaking to this general interest audience, or at a broadsheet like the LA Times, where you can pick up the calendar section and see the latest movie review, and then there's a new review by McNulty or Margaret Ray of some hot play. Now the LA Times doesn't do that quite as often as they used to. But nonetheless, that's the old model.
So you're saying that the theater critics will have to go rogue, basically?
I think
on their own and create their own brands and personal.
I'm already feeling that now. Because the problem with sites online is that it's sort of a ghetto because you don't share the page. There'll be a headline maybe on the toilet paper roll of the blog, but a site like Stage and Cinema, you have to be into the theater just to go to that site, or even Bitter Lemons, which, by the way, is one of the I just want to get this out there because I think that's really one of the positive things that's happened to LA Theater and Criticism is calling, forming this aggregate site. It's centered.
Bitter-lemons.com.
It has become the center of the theater conversation in Los Angeles. It has rationalized and centralized like this kind of bewildering forest of criticism out there, and it's really cool, and I'm on there constantly. And actually, why don't we give him a round of applause, because that is But that said, yes, I mean, look, man, it is like so, print is extinct, it's a dinosaur.
Well, it's interesting you say that because the OC Register, they now don't, unless you're a subscriber to the paper, you can't get their online stuff. And I was speaking to someone on that topic, and they said that the powers that be of the OC Register have decided they're going all in with their print. So they're going to throw money at their print and make it better, because their point is that the reason print is dying is because people aren't doing it well anymore. So they're like, screw this online stuff. The subscribers who pay for our paper are the ones who are going to get the content. We're not going to make our content free like most sites, like LA Times. LA Times you have to pay too a little bit. And we're just going to make our writers better, our paper better. We're going to cover more stuff, and that might just be fighting against the tide. I mean, what do you think about that? I mean, is print just not?
The behemoths will always be here by name. When you have a name and you're famous in America, that'll take you a long time. And I think, like Time Out Chicago just closed their offices, and they're going to be only online, and Daily Variety, and that the trend is on. That I think as maybe Orange County does this big last, instead of being Phoenix from the ashes, it's like the thorn bird that impales itself with its sweetest song before it dies. Is that is going to create, when a tree falls in a forest, a redwood, it creates a huge amount of foliage to grow up around it, which did not have sunlight before. And I think that's what's going to happen. There's no way to stop the tide of these blossoming websites, because all it takes is $5 a month to GoDaddy and you can start a site. But I think that I also think that Americans don't want to spend money on anything. And if they can get it for free, I think they would rather go somewhere and lower their standards. Can we talk about McDonald's, please? And this is a McNation. And so people, I think, we are already dealing with a limited audience. Now they may be limited even more. So I think people will go first to what's free, and then if they think they're not getting what feeds their soul, they might pay.
I think I'm creating a new site. It's going to be called the McCritic.
The McCritic, I like it.
Yeah, thank you very much. Don't that's mine. Nobody. This is from someone in the audience. This is for all of you. How about the role of critic as Socratic gadfly? Asking a stream of questions rather than describing or prescribing. Any thoughts on that?
I like that. I actually, I find the prescriptive element of the job to be, it just feels false to me to some extent. I mean, I saw a play a couple years ago, Bashed at Celebration Theater, which was a gay hip-hop musical. And I was like, what? This is the best gay hip-hop musical I've seen all year. Obviously it has a kind of a self-selecting audience, that kind of play. I was delighted to get to see it because I thought it was a lot of fun. I'm a mousy middle-aged woman, and ordinarily would not, necessarily go on her own. So I think where was I going with that?
It's about the gadfly.
Oh, yeah,
The Socratic gadfly.
Seeing as much as possible, seeing as many things as you can, I'm still kind of juggling with the large scale of the beat for the LA Times. I have to go to La Jolla sometimes, and it's like if I lived in North Dakota, I'd be reviewing South Dakota. But it feels really far away. It's like a 6-hour round trip. So I just think that sometimes just a description of what it is or just sort of contextualizing it can be almost more valuable. I think the words of praise are so empty now, stunning or stupendous. I think these words have almost no meaning. I think that's why it's almost more exciting when you see a play that you hate, because then you have something that you can really write. You can really throw yourself into it. Whereas it's just saying, oh, this is wonderful, it's marvelous. And I feel like these words are
it's interesting because I know a lot of the critics in this town now, and many of them who work only online, they will not. I'll go to shows with them, and we'll both hate the show or something, and they will not write that review. I'm like, what are you talking about? You have to write that review. You're a good reviewer. They need to know this, and they just don't do it. And it may speak to what you're talking about because they want their free tickets. That's all they got. They're not getting paid.
Well, I think that's not like, that person is not really a real critic. I mean, that person is sort of scamming for tickets, frankly. I don't respect that. What were you saying? You were saying a minute ago about the praise, the words of praise somehow feel, hollow, or it's certainly been used a lot, and so on and so forth. And maybe sometimes if you're saying something, the more problems that you have with the show, at least you're being more specific about it, or it's easier to be specific about it. I understand what you mean. I don't entirely agree with that. One of the things when I was working for the Weekly that when I started, that was the first place I was doing theater reviews. I did film reviews before that. But one of the things that Stephen Lee Morris, as the editor there, was instrumental in kind of pushing me towards was, particularly with the Weekly, you had I think it was 200 words, 220 words at that time. I don't know what it is now, maybe even less. But it was like writing a haiku. I mean, you really didn't have much space. But his thing was, be specific. Don't just say it was fantastic, whatever. If you can, find something specific in that show and say why you liked it or why you didn't like it. Because that really means something. If you can, as opposed to just saying, it was good. I mean, sometimes that's what you're going to say. You can't think of anything else necessarily to say, but it was great, it was ever. But I mean, if you can say, it was good because of this, it was whatever, I think that really means something no matter whether you liked it or whether you didn't like it. And I think if you're just going basically to give a great review because you just want the tickets, there's no point in having you, be there. And one thing that frustrates me is there have always been people like that in the theater. There have always been people who are there basically for the wine and snacks after the show on opening night, right? And most people know who they are. And I guess maybe with the internet now. Well, yeah. But it's what bothers me is because, I mean, I've heard from, and I know a lot of the publicists in town and stuff, and I'll chat with them after shows and whatever, and they'll be very frustrated sometimes because there is so much theater in Los Angeles at any given time. It's difficult, even because there are less and less critics a lot of the time, or at least less and less critics from papers that people necessarily have heard of. And so they want those people because that at least brings some cachet to their play. Hey, so the Weekly liked it, the Times liked it, whatever. They would like those people to come see their shows. And they can't always get them there because there's so many, shows to cover. And so what'll end up happening is they'll end up taking one of these reviews from somebody they basically know was there for the wine and chips. And it'll be one of these, oh, it was great, kind of thing. And that's how they promote their show. And that's frustrating to me. I totally understand why they're doing it, but it's frustrating to me because I know it's a lie. It's basically, and they're promoting their shows with a lie. And that's frustrating that that's kind of where we're at. I mean, I understand why they feel the need to put up a name, anything positive to bring people to their theater, but I wish we weren't at that situation, and I don't know how to fix that particular thing. Because yeah, as long as people can do this, they probably will.
Ramona, did you have to-
Yeah, as someone who works for a site and we do get press comms, I find the blog format, particularly liberating because I do get to say whatever I want. I don't have backers that or anybody who's paying to edit me down because so it's like if I don't like something, I'm going to say I didn't like it. But I'm going to say it well because there's a specific reason I didn't like it, and because I'm a critic, I can communicate that well. So, for example, I went to go see Backbeat at the Amundsen, and it was the first time that we were able to get into, the big theater, so it was pretty exciting. And I was very happy.
The big time.
Oh my God, I'm pressed now. But and I'm sitting there watching this thing, and I really, really wanted to like it, but there was just challenges to my liking it, And the thing is, this is people paid money for this show. Like there are tons of community theaters who would, like for a fraction of that money, would kill, And here's this big production and this big name, and they can't do a developed character, or theoretically. So I went, and I really wanted to like it. But when I wrote the review, I wrote it very accurately because there were specific things: character development. You know what I mean? So I feel like having the format is liberating, and I'm gonna go give my opinion. I don't. These for example, the big run theaters, they're gonna make money no matter what I say. So, why, it doesn't, you know what I mean? Like, it doesn't, so if I don't like it, fine. They're okay.
So
They're
for
gonna be
you-
fine.
So for you, the rise of the blogger critic is a very good thing.
Well, yeah, because I am one, you know? But the thing is, I don't find that, like,
But
I don't
Terry,
feel
you
like
were
it's,
kind of saying it's kind of degrading.
No, that's not what I was saying at all. No. I'm saying the people who are going just to get free shit.
But those are a lot of
Regardless.
Well,
blogger
but I'm not saying, I'm not grouping in all blogger critics like that. I never said that. I think where we're at right now is, I mean, I'm in the drama critic circle. I know a lot of the critics in town and have for, 15 years now or something, from all sorts of different publications, you know, and so I have an idea of what's going on in a lot of different papers. And right now, and over the last several years, is everybody's getting let go. You know, and everybody's having to scramble and find someone, either decide, do I want to keep doing this at all? Or how do I want to keep doing this? Do I want to create a blog? Do I want to join some sort of other website? You know, whatever. And everybody's having to, I mean, we're in a period of transition, and at least in American arts criticism, I think it's happening across the board. And it's going to take a while until this whole thing, you know, works itself out. And I don't know how long it'll take. Say 10 years from now, there will probably be a bunch of websites that'll be more, secure, or and ones that everybody's familiar with, and then people will have, you know, aggregated to a particular place, and so on and so forth. But right now, it's the Wild West, you know, and so, but no, I have no problem with bloggers. I mean, most people I know, that's where they're going. Please don't think that I think that. That's not what I was saying.
It's the rise of the blogger that's the problem, not the blogger critic. So we're just getting drowned in this sea of humanity right now. And so I have a purpose. In order for me to stay doing what I'm doing, because I am so close to burnout, I'm gonna close this site any day now. Why?
I've known you for
So
4 years.
if you've known anything about, if my writers have called me and said, where's all the invites? I get invites from around the country, I forward them to the writers, and they get to choose what they wanna see because we don't pay. This is a problem. It's what I call the Stephen Stanley syndrome, where you will only go to see what you think you're probably going to like. And you've got to get on the Geffen, and you want to get in the Amundsen because they're cushy seats and they have better production values, and they usually don't do the best theater at all, nationwide. So I have a job, and I tell my writers now when they come to stage and cinema, if you don't want to destroy mediocrity, do not come here. Because I'm not making money, I don't have a life, and I'm supporting, and I live in LA, where it's the worst theater in the country. So what's my reward? Because that's why I go to Chicago and other, because we have nothing to compare it to. LA thinks LA is its own world, and it kind of is actually, but it doesn't represent theater nationwide or indeed worldwide. There's things going on in Europe we don't even know about. So at this time in my life where I'm at, I have to have this purpose to destroy mediocrity because it's drowning what's great. You know what I mean? When
Well,
there's
it's
so much.
interesting because Stephen Morris and I were having a conversation, and he is doing a research project where he's looking at the amount of shows that are playing and the amount of press releases that are being sent in at this time and at the exact time 10 years ago. And I think the numbers that he said, he picked exact dates and went back 10 years. And you know, because there's always a big argument here that we do the most theater per capita in the country. And I think there was, at a period, there was close to like 1,200 shows going on when I was first here back in the late 90s or early 90s. And he checked out 10 years ago, and there were 85 shows running. And now, same time compared, there were 35. Now, some might consider that a bad thing. I consider that a very good thing because I've been seeing a lot of theater the past 5 years, and I think the quality continues to get better. So what does that mean? The fact that there's less shows and the quality still gets better, maybe it's because the mediocre stuff is kind of, the showcasey stuff is sort of falling away. I know you don't agree with that, Tony, but.
No, because I see theater. You have to see a lot of theater to talk about theater. You can't see 1 to 4 shows a month, and a lot of critics do that. And I don't know what the quota is for Drama Critic Circle. How many shows? What is it? 3 you have to review a month? What is it?
I think it's like, yeah, that's the minimum.
But is there a quota for how many they have to actually visit?
How many have to be reviewed?
How many
I'm
you
sorry.
have to see? How many theater shows you have to see?
I'm sorry, your question is, yes, it's a quota per year, yes, a minimum.
Okay. Can Can we know what that is? Do you know what that is?
Off the top of my head, I don't.
Okay, that's cool.
Yeah.
The point is, I do know a lot of critics in LA, Chicago, everywhere else, and they don't see as much theater now for two reasons. Number one is, it's a burnout to see a lot of mediocrity after a while. It's like having a lot of bad dates. You're like, I want to be celibate. and when that happens to my writers, and then they do see something bad, they're like, now I have to talk for 3 hours, 6 hours I have to work when no one's going to read it. Because we know that people that are watching the show aren't going to read it. How do I know? Look at the Facebook shares on Stage and Cinema. If it's a positive review, 200 Facebook shares overnight. If it's a negative review, 0. If it's the Geffen or somewhere like that it's a positive review, they don't do any publicity because they're too busy paying for parties. And so their job is not to do all Facebooking and all that. So I'm like, well, maybe I should. And I start doing that work, and after a while, the point that I'm making is it's too much. Too much. Our society, if you say, hey, it's a good thing that there's 100 people out there, it's that everybody deserves a trophy thing. And I'm like, it's not about quantity, it's about quality for me.
Margaret, are you going to say something?
Oh, I was just gonna say I'm not quite as pessimistic as Tony. But I frankly personally love the internet. I think it's so fun to
It's
like.
a nice thing, isn't it? That's so cute.
I mean, I love what it affords me, which is, you know, sometimes if I have a question about something, like on the iPhone, you know how they finish your searches for you? You just type in like, one time my daughter and I were wondering why our dog rolled on worms, and we typed in why do D, and it wrote why do dogs roll? I mean, like it knew what we were going to ask. Obviously, a lot of people are asking that question, so I feel like I really tapped into the zeitgeist. Something like that. And, like when I saw Priscilla in the Desert, I was very shocked by the portrayal of the mail order bride. I don't know if you've seen the show, but she does some shocking things, and it's very, I thought it was very insulting, but I didn't, so I typed in, did anybody else notice? So I got some, you know, I found some sites where other people, but I find it very soothing to have all these opinions out there. I remember when the internet first became a thing, and I found all this information about medical conditions I didn't know. And I realized a lot of it was just lies. Like a lot of the stuff you find on the internet is not true. And then after a while, I began realizing that I would have to go to more reputable sources to find information. So at first, you're just really excited that all this information is available, and then eventually, and I think that's what's happening.
You think that's what's happening with the,
I think it's going to take a while. I think
what Terry was talking about?
yeah, I think that eventually we are going to be able to sort it out, and people are always going to want to get information, and advertisers are going to want to get to those people, and the people who provide the information are going to want to be paid.
So it's just a
eventually,
shift.
I think we're shifting. It's like, you know, when the horseback messengers, when they started printing papers, we're like, hey, we're not going to be able to do any our work anymore. So it's kind of like that. I mean, it's a new.
But I don't trust the internet.
No, you
It's
can't
not
trust it.
policed.
But
And
do
so
you-
how do I know that information is accurate?
But do you trust?
But the
You
internet did not create mediocrity or
I
lies.
didn't say it did. What I'm saying is, I don't hold the internet as the future of possibility. I hold it as drowning. It's too much. Now, it's here to stay. What I'm saying is, it's called taking a stand in the drift.
Yeah, but do you whatever that means, I don't trust the internet, but do you trust your audience?
Well, they read us.
I'm
I'm telling
But
no,
it's just
listen,
medium.
Colin, I may sound cynical, but I'm having a little trouble trusting people as a whole lately, and I used to be very trustworthy
Do you need to
because
come over
I'll
there
tell
and
you
hug
why.
me?
This
I will
isn't,
hug you right now.
yeah, this is not as general as you think. The people in my life personally have become so distracted in the last 10 years. So this all day, and so that, and moving in little short bursts of life. And I think that's what's affected storytelling and playwriting in the theater, is that if a playwright is doing this all the day, and then like when I do, and then I go to actually write a review, I'm burnt out from editing and the emails and everything else. So I'm saying that it's not that I don't trust people as loving, human, wanna-be giving people. I'm saying that as we were not designed to be this mechanical and this distracted. And so there's sort of an ADHD syndrome going on with a lot of my friends where they can't really focus or keep their word, and some of my reviewers are late or not really able to be discerning anymore, and a critic has to be discerning when they go to see a show. So that's the part where I'm not really trustworthy, that these are the people I'm supposed to,
But when I say, do you trust your audience, it goes back to Margaret and Terry's point, is that the audience will eventually go, this guy's a better critic than this person over here, and they'll just start reading this person.
At
It's just a shift in
communications
the
group,
dissemination
right.
of the media.
2 years ago, the conversation amongst everybody was, how do we find an audience? And a lot of artistic directors now, instead of worrying about what they're putting in their season, are worried about how to get an audience. So they're starting to poll the audience and ask them what they want, and what do you want to hear about a story? What kind of stories do you want to see? And a futurist named David Houle stood up and was the keynote speaker and said, you can't figure out what your audience is going to want. You're going down the wrong tube. An audience will let you know what they like when they see it. So theaters should actually go back to just honing to a vision and doing what they do best instead of worrying about an audience. And that's a tough thing to say in the middle of a recession. But I think as a visionary culture, theater is starting to copycat the internet and that kind of world instead of being a beacon of light within the insanity.
Can it do both though? Can't it
I hope so.
serve the community and also have a unique artistic vision?
I don't know, theater is supposed to serve, theater is not supposed to make you money, it's not supposed to serve the community, it's not for the equity, it's not.
I would
that's
disagree
not-
though about
Right.
How can you say
community
theater is
because
not supposed to serve the community?
Theater,
Specifically because-
theater, the goal of doing theater, I don't think there's when I say serving the community, I mean we putting a message out, and theater used to be the place where we would have a conversation we're not allowed to have, but that's not really happening anymore. For me, theater, like a lot of the issue-based theater, well, we'll have one that's gay, one that's black, one that's for deaf, but it becomes about these issues, not about people who happen to have these issues.
Well, that's another topic, is, you know, what kind of plays people are writing and stuff like that.
But I mean, going back to his whole point about serving the community, there are history. I mean, there's, for example, Chicano theater. The whole reason Chicano theater came into existence is because it was issue based, but it was a means of organizing. It was a means of telling an untold story that was very significant. It was a means to get people to have advocacy, to view their lives as meaning something, like to see themselves as not less than human, just picking, produce. So that was the roots of a specific style of theater, and it's since evolved, but that was something that spoke to a community, and it still does that today. I think that kind of theater is still very important and very valid. So while you can have the type of theater that maybe isn't doing that at the same time, both things can happen. It doesn't. Some plays are about the issue, and when they're done well, there's a very good story in that. There's a very good story supporting this theme of an issue or whatever. But I think responding to the needs of the community are very important. For example, where I worked at Casa 0101, the only reason I am even involved in theater is because it was there. It was what's the word? It was accessible. I grew up going to shows at the Los Angeles Theater Center. The first play that I ever saw was Bowl of Beans by Culture Clash at the LA Theater Center back in the 90s. And I had never in my life had I imagined that you could see brown people on stage performing. And they were talking about stuff I didn't even know about. And it was an amazing experience. And so that was the first time that I ever saw that it could be accessible. And then you have, I never thought to go to theater school, so here I am in the beginning of the 2000s, and this woman opens up this theater space, and I've never thought about being a playwright, but I went in, taking classes, and I've since written a play, so there are functions to community theater that that are significant, that are important.
You think it can be both, yeah?
Yeah,
Right,
I do think it
it's
can be
not-
both.
Right, it certainly is about community, or amateur, or equity theater. It's not about what kind of theater. That wasn't what I was referring to at all, because I got my start at the Anaheim Parks and Recreation Department when I was 7 as Tom Sawyer. I mean, give me a stage and 3 seats. In fact, the couch in my living room to do puppet shows was a stage, and I was in love with it, and it was cemented by that experience. So I'm talking about a bigger picture of theater as commerce right now, and theater as an agenda.
No, I understand that, but at the same time, there's still this other stuff that's happening at the same time. There is theater as commerce happening, but there's also this other theater as a community response that
Right,
exists
so
at
I'm
the
a
same
critic, and I go to see all this theater.
time. Yes.
Now, am I supposed to be more lenient towards a company of color if they're trying to say something that is not being said or not heard of in the community, if the production does not work?
Should you be more lenient?
No, but you should understand the context, and I think you should help your audience understand the context that theater is engaging in that conversation with, right? So if we say we're going to apply the same standards to something that happens on this stage, to something that happens at Cornerstone, to something that happens at the Amundsen, and ignore the notion that one is one is here and one is here and one is here, and this stuff, one is a Broadway tour that's designed to make money, and another is about the community. If we're applying a single standard and a monolithic one to all three of those things, I think we're doing ourselves and our audience and that theater a disservice. Which is why I bristle at all these notions of truth and this and, oh my God, the internet's going to kill us all and stuff, because it seems to me that more important right now than saying thumbs up or thumbs down is providing the context. Yes. Right? Is to maybe in that Socratic sense say, here's where this theater is entering into the conversations. Here's the questions that it's trying to ask. And once you know those things, then I trust everyone else to make their own opinion, right? But I think maybe what we can provide, and maybe our responsibility at this point, is to provide a context that maybe somebody who isn't inside baseball isn't going to know, right? So if you walk into a Cornerstone show, you sort of have to know what that's all about, right? You sort of have to know that they are actually not trying to play the game in the same way as these people are trying to play the game. And I think that's important, right? I think that, rather than this, hey, it was great, might be more valuable.
But how does that affect the, and believe me, I'm totally contextual. Every review I do is in context. However, what do you do when you're at the Hollywood Fringe? Is your context, well, you need to be more forgiving because they don't have money, or they're just trying, or it's a workshop. And I really mean this, I don't know. Because I won't go to too many Fringe anymore. What's the context when you go to Fringe when you talk to your reader? You kind of have to lower your standards a little, or you kind of have to understand they're trying to get ahead, or they don't have money. How do you do that in
I think you can say, okay, this is a Fringe show, or whatever the context is. I don't think you have to be more lenient. I think you can just be upfront, okay, this is where this kind of production is at, or whatever. And then from there, you do your review. You go into it with the understanding that there's, like, specifically with Fringe shows, there's going to be a range of quality, there's going to be a range of ability. So you say that, okay, but and then from there you go and you do your critique. Because if you're thinking about your audience,
sorry, would you say then you lower and raise your standards according to the?
No, what I was going to say is you take into consideration that. The thing is, okay, so there was this question about audience. Are you talking to a non-theater participating audience, or are you talking to an audience and theater people who make theater? And I always found, as somebody who has done theater, I always found criticism really helpful, especially if it was specific and exact. Like, this sucked because blah blah blah. Good. As somebody who makes theater, I now know this is something I need to work on. So you take that information and you move on with it next. So no, you're not more lenient. You give it the respect it deserves.
I got a question from the audience. That was good. That kind of taps on some of this stuff. It's kind of a patchy question, but I'll see it. Why does theater criticism have to be so exclusionary/elite? I keep hearing that it isn't the way it once was, that it's mediocre or even dead. There's an insistence on holding on to the old way and not seeing the advantages, opening it up to communities that are underserved by the established writers.
I haven't been hearing that up here at all.
Yeah.
I don't know what they're talking about. I feel like I do think, having written for multiple venues, and also now writing for a website, which is basically, it's what, there's nobody telling me what I can say and what I can't say. There's no, no editing, and no content editing, at least in terms of I can say whatever I feel. And that's very freeing. And I think that's the great thing about the democratization of this, the opening it up of the internet and so on and so forth, is people can say what they actually think. And so then they can't blame you know, their review on, oh, it was edited because I work for such and such, and I can, oh, if only I say what I really mean. Well, go ahead, say what you really mean, and then let the chips fall where they may. You know, and so I think that's great. You have the freedom if you are writing on the internet and you're not writing for some publication that does have some sort of structure you have to stick to. I think that's great.
I think historically, I think almost every culture has always been talking about how theater is dead. I mean, I think when you look back, I read an article by Robert Brustein written in 1983 saying, what is the role of the critic now that theater is such a struggling art form? I mean, it's been going on for centuries since theater was created. I think we've all been mourning the loss of some earlier idealized theater.
Theater is a very healthy zombie. It has always been in the process of dying, and it never actually dies.
Zombie, we found our theme. A healthy zombie, yes. Well, on that note, speaking about Los Angeles theater, I want to get, because Los Angeles theater, as we all know, is a very unique sort of world. And there's a lot of changes going on. There's this producers league that is being formed in the 99-seat community. They just ratified their bylaws, and it's interesting because I've always found that what this town needs more than more talented artists is more talented producers. Because I think the business of theater in LA is you know, it's not done well up to a certain degree. So I think that's a good thing. And one of the things we're going to try to do at Bitter Lemons is organize the critics. So I'll be talking to all you guys again. But but I wanted to get from you
Sounds
guys.
That's
ominous.
organized now.
We're
Wait,
still
all of
working
you into this one little room. Click. Yeah.
we're still working on the method of that. But I want to just get one word from each of you guys on how would you describe Los Angeles theater? One word.
Diverse?
Sarah?
One word. Well, I'll just go with what my gut was. Great. I mean, I could expand on that, but you asked one word,
Yeah,
so that's great.
Underserved.
Sure.
Evolving.
Anthony?
Pass.
Why didn't you think that?
Elitist?
You answer this question. You see everything with me.
One word, Tony. I know that's very difficult for you.
Uninspiring.
He needs it. So now, how about one word on the purpose of theater criticism?
How come it always start with me?
Let's start with Tony.
Okay.
First thing, come on, gut.
Feedback.
Feedback. All right.
Context.
Analysis.
Revision.
Opinion.
What was the state of theater criticism
The
or
purpose
the
of
purpose?
theater. Gut.
History.
And then another thing, I want you guys, I don't know how many of you have seen Fringe shows, or I know you've seen lots of shows running, but if you've seen a Fringe show, tell me your favorite Fringe show and your favorite just regular running show in town right now, so people can benefit from your opinions. And let's start in the middle. Bill?
I haven't seen that many Fringe shows, but I really like the Alex Knox show. No static at all. It's a one-man show, but it's done very nicely. It's a smart show. And, you know, I don't know if it'll knock your socks off, but it might curl them a little. And the same director, by a strange coincidence, is doing this terrific, it is, excuse the pejorative, a rock opera. But it's an amazing score. It's a 1-hour show. It's at Son of Semele. It's called The Last Days of Mary Stuart. It's an adaptation of Schiller. And it's a truly entrancing evening. Go see it.
There you go. Ramona?
Exorcistic. That's
Fringe.
at Fringe was pretty fun. It was a rock opera, and it was pretty fantastic. There was vomit. And
That's your three-word review right there. There was
there was
one.
vomit, seriously.
Yeah.
And house band. And the non-Fringe show that's running, Hungry Women in Paris, or just Hungry Women at Casa
What is it called again?
Hungry Women at Casa Cervantes.
Derek?
Oh, if I have to just pick one Fringe show, A Man of No Importance is a new theater company. They're taking on more or less at least the LA premiere, maybe even the West Coast premiere of that particular play. And man, they knock it out of the park. It doesn't feel like it's a fully done production, and every aspect of it is fantastic. So I would say that for the Fringe. The show that I really like that's just running regularly right now is at the Matrix Theater. It's got like a 30-word long title. It's like, we are proud to present a presentation about the Herero of Namibia, and it goes on. It's amazing. It's a play about 6 actors putting on a show about a genocide, a little-known genocide that happened in Namibia at the turn of the 20th century. And so you think it's going to be pretty heavy, but most of it is about these actors squabbling and trying to get more stage time and singing and dancing, and it's hilarious. And then by the end it gets pretty serious, but it's really, really good. I mean, the actors are fantastic, the direction is super creative, it's really amazing.
Excellent. Anthony?
I'll pander to the audience and say Mike Schlitz Jesus Show in the Fringe Festival. And I would echo the Matrix Theater Show.
Margaret?
I haven't seen any Fringe shows. Sorry, I think the kids are out of school.
Well, then give us two
Well,
regular.
the one saw, I don't even know if it's still running, but it was called Beautiful at Latino Theater Center. It's a one-woman show.
Closes this afternoon.
Oh, so you run now.
Run.
Beautiful show.
Tony?
The Fringe show, Man of No Importance. I equally agree, and that sets a very high standard for Fringe for people that do have a brand new company and are up to something bigger and can use the promotional tie-in with the Fringe. And they are clearly, right out of the gate, up to something much bigger. And 15 members in the cast as well. Currently running is tough, because now that I'm becoming word out on theater, I'm seeing more opera and LA Phil and reviewing that stuff, but I laughed in Yes, Prime Minister.
Oh, yeah.
It's not, it's not a great play, it's just an elongated sitcom, really. But Dagan Matthews is a master to see in this show, and I laughed. If I make a noise during the show, besides get me the fuck out of here, and I recommend it, and I cried in Man of No Importance, and I laughed in Yes, Prime Minister.
All right, good. I'm going to read a quote from LA Times, and then I'm going to open it up for questions. This is from a recent article that Charles McNulty did on the Fringe, which was a pretty good article, I thought. He says, the HFF, Hollywood Fringe Festival, stands behind its decision to make this an open festival, even if the rationale remains somewhat mysterious. LA theater could use a Fringe with a filter. Anything to separate the wheat from the chaff would be invaluable, but an open Fringe is better than no Fringe at all. Reason that quote stood out to me is because aren't the theater critics supposed to be the filter?
Not in terms of putting together the festival.
Yeah,
We didn't have anything to do with it.
Right.
So I think that's what he's saying is in terms of, if I'm understanding him correctly, he's talking about the people who actually put the festival together.
I would argue that an uncurated festival, it's your guys' duty to come in and be the
Well,
filter for the
yeah, the world is our uncurated festival, isn't it?
Yeah. Right, and then you guys are the filter.
I'll
All
get right on that.
Okay, let's, yes, right over here.
I'm Dale Reynolds. I'm a critic with Stage Happenings, and you're all speaking to things that I've been wondering about for a long time. And a couple of names have been mentioned, people that, in my opinion, are not critics but reviewers. And I'm wondering if you could speak to what you all think the difference between a true critic and a true reviewer is, and whether there should be a differential.
Yeah, there is big C criticism and small R reviewing. I am the latter, and I freely admit to that. Really, a real critic, the tradition you know, like a Stanley Kaufman or Addison DeWitt, who, by the way, is George G. Nathan, the pre-war New York critic. Yeah, they're very much about thoughtfully placing shows into context and thinking about shows above and beyond simply, you know, the production values. Thinking about theater not as a product, but as part of a larger culture and a literary tradition. And of course, that kind of criticism is getting very rare in newspaper journalism for reasons that have to do, you know, with the cultural history we're in. You can still find it in journals and magazines. You know, there are still some more police people out there. It is becoming rare. But what I do is try to connect audiences with plays, and I leave the deep thinking to Stephen Lee Morris at the Weekly, who has the job of deep thinker, and at the LA Times that would be Charles McNulty, and anyway.
Anybody else?
I feel like I tried to be both. I don't really, frankly, I feel like I am both. I feel like for me, it's more a matter of inspiration. I try to put things in context if I can. Basically, what it comes down to me with the show is how much I know about the show, how inspired I am by it in terms of just like mentally to write something. Sometimes you'll see yourself and you may have an opinion about it, but you don't have anything fascinating to say maybe sometimes. And other times, maybe you do. And so I feel like maybe when I get inspired, I'm more of a critic. And when I'm less inspired, maybe I'm more of a reviewer. But I'm trying to be a critic. You know, I'm trying to be somebody who's putting things into context, who isn't just saying, hey, it's great, go see it. You know, but other times it's like, well, okay, I may not have that much to say, and I end up being the guy who's saying, you know, hey, it's great, go see it. But I try to do, you know, more than that if I can. That's my goal, at least.
I think a reviewer glosses over the subject matter, kind of glides over it, a generalization, as it were, plays it safer. I think reviewers do that. Reviewers don't have to take as much as a risk. I think they play it safe. A critic has to be risky and honest and have that discernment. And I don't know, you know, it's hard to put into words, but I ran into someone once who works for a major outlet, and I said, do you believe the review? I mean, I don't understand why you could say that about a review. And we were getting into this little thing over a show. He said, Tony, the difference is you're a critic. You're supposed to say that. I said, yeah, but you said you agree with me and it's not in your review. Because I'm a reviewer. That's not my job. My job is just to give it sort of a general tone. I said, so if you think people aren't going to like you? I don't understand what's behind it. He said, it's just easier, safer. You know, and so I took that to heart. I don't know if that's true and if we really can't say. So I went home and I looked in the dictionary under critic. And it says someone who's on a fault-finding mission. That's how it describes critic. And if you look up an evaluator, it's somebody who's looking for the value. And I think reviewers also do that. They tend to go to a show and look for what works and kind of sweep under the carpet what doesn't work. So if you look in a reviewer's review, you had one up recently as Critique of the Week, you can find those one words in there that, you know, atrocious, buried under this is the greatest thing you've ever seen. You can just find them in there. I think those are reviews where they'll back up what's sweet, but they won't back up what they didn't like, perhaps.
Yeah, but review of the week just wouldn't sound as cool because the acronym for critique of the week is CAL.
And I'm a chamber, so you gotta have the cuss sound. Critic is way funnier than reviewer. Right?
Words matter. All right, another question.
This is a thought in response to something that was said earlier, and I would welcome anyone saying they agree or disagree and why. When I look at a bunch of reviews, the main thing I want to know is what type of thing it is, and if there's any. I'm looking for a comedy with people in it who have performed in front of live audiences, not actors doing comedy, comedians. And when you were talking about, do we do the benefit of the doubt or change our values when there's a low budget, when it's a message thing. I say you can even start the review saying, this is message theater, or this is a comedy designed to make you laugh, and then get into whether you think they did it well or not. But people tend to want to have a pet genre, they have pet subjects, and the information, what it is the most valuable thing of a short critique.
I do think one thing, I mentioned this earlier, but one thing I always try to do is figure out what was the goal of the production? What do you think that they wanted to achieve, and did they achieve it? You know, and I think that's kind of what sort of speaks to what you're saying. You know, I think you're saying that you should label it right up top, so this is what I think they were trying to do, and then I would say, well, this is whether I think they achieved it or not. But I think that's really important.
But
You know,
for example, is it science fiction?
right.
You know, if we want to see a science fiction play, you want to know this is one, and you want to know that it's not a science fiction play.
Because the thing is
You
too,
go for a long list. But if it's a message thing, if it's about a particular subculture, ethnic or sexual preference, that's something that somebody's going to want to know. But on the other hand, if Nathan Lane is in it, that changes whether I want to see it.
Going to or not going to?
When I first saw him the first few times, I didn't like it, but he's played some classic comedy roles and done well with them, so now I'm impressed with him. And also I've been impressed with things he's done on talk shows. He had really funny things to say about a movie called The Mousetrap, I think it was called. Oh, Mouse Hunt. And it was dazzling, you know, I think he went to a writer, he worked with the writer, cut it, and then when it was on Letterman, they were both getting laughs. In fact, he was getting laughs, made Letterman competitive enough to be funny. And so when I see him playing two roles in Zero Mostel, Zero Mostel was the greatest comic actors of all time, and he wasn't an embarrassment. He was good. Wow. So he had my trust.
Nathan, if you're listening, there you go. Any responses to that, or?
Well, I usually have a word limit of about 300 words, which is more than 250 they have. But it is a lot of information to cram in. Sometimes I feel like it's maybe more like a puzzle. And as I was mentioning, I feel like sometimes people are reading it, they want to see their names or their son's name or something. So I feel like if I just make a joke or relate an anecdote, that's like two names that somebody can't clip to hang it on their bulletin board. So it's like I'm like, oh no, so I have to really prioritize the information. I do think that I try to establish what kind of event it is pretty early on, so that people will know. But I guess sometimes it's really hard to fit all the information, and sometimes that might get lost. I don't know. I mean, I hope not.
I had the same experience whenever I had a set word limit, I would dread getting a musical assignment. Because you would have, 30 people or something to deal with, and I felt I wanted to try and deal with them and try to be fair. But yeah, you were limited by space, and so you would end up having to make those choices, and that's tricky.
There's a question right up here.
Some of you who've been around for a little while longer, I'm curious, I'm Allison Neal Thomas, I'm the artistic director for Southern California Theater, East Opera, in this theater. Are you finding that you're changing your criticism based on your audience, their education level? Well, we've gotten, this may sound elitist, but we've literally gotten reviews on Bitter Lemons. Thank you, Colin, we're at 91%, but saying, 92, sorry. Saying that if the source material were relevant, or if they understood what the source, it's East Opera, and it says right at Frogs. Are you finding that's affecting? Are you noticing a change in the audiences? We keep getting reviews that say, I never thought I liked opera, but I love this. I would say 30, 40% of our reviews are that. It's wonderful. Do you have any opinion as to the audiences affecting the material or the plays or the theater that's going up, or affecting your critiques? Are you noticing that? And I'm talking about those who've been around longer.
Well, it's difficult if it's Priscilla, Queen of the Desert, and everybody around me is having the time of their life, and I'm like, I can't. I'm trying. I want to laugh. I can't. It's getting dumber and dumber, and the audience is having the time of their life.
Right.
So my job is to at least recognize that for them, there's something going on.
Right.
But I want my writers to speak to an audience not as erudite, So for example, I've asked my writers, could you please go to Lyric Opera in Chicago? Or now we're in the Met Opera in New York. Would you go, well, I don't know opera, Tony. Perfect. Put that in your review. Say, I'm not an opera goer. And I've never understood why a bunch of fat ladies singing, whatever it is. But you know, this is going on. And I say, treat it like theater, but they're afraid. Same thing with music. When you go to the LA Philharmonic, do you really have to know what kind of saxophone that was playing? Do you really have to know the history of Debussy to get that you hear those chords for the first time? And so that's what I'm trying to reach out to and they won't. I think they're too scared to come off as dumb or not know what they're talking about. And I'm like, well, that's already your audience. So you might as well, I'm sorry I'm down in the audience, but guys, is that I think it's important to know and for me to accept that like the LA Times is still like a 9th grade reading level. I have to talk to my audience, not like I know more than you do. I want them to come into the theater even if it sucks. That's my job. I do. I'm an advocate for theater, which is why I kind of try to destroy bad theater. Does that make sense? So it's hard, but I know the audience doesn't want to be talked down to. Do you believe some of these reviews where they talk about the point of the dancer and her foot and the leap and the jeté, and you have no idea what they're talking about because it's a dancer writing for dancers. So if we want a bigger audience, we need to talk to the audience at large while holding up the higher standards. Does that answer?
Thank you. So that was my question, does this belong to the Fringe? And all these people said yes, and we've got good reviews, but I think we're frightening people away. We're trying to make it accessible and whatever, so.
Well, the Fringe
I like
for
these
me is
reviews.
tough, and I know we haven't brought this up, but another job not of the critic is show doctor. In my day, when I grew up, they gave me a check for that. Where you go in during rehearsals, you're like, okay, here's what's wrong, move this song, and now they want two things. They want feedback to be better. It's not my job. What's going to make me a better artist? Getting out of the theater. And so if I go to the Fringe and there might be a jewel amongst the Fringe, I'm going to have to turn it down. I'm going to have to not see it because it's not worth going the other 95, 96 shows. So it gets tough on a critic because after a while you're like, plus, when theater is now 55 minutes, 60 minutes, and playwrights are writing and it's the same thing, how do you know it's 90 minutes, no intermission when you go to produce a show? I have timed so many shows exactly 90 minutes on the dot. 4 characters, 1 set. Because people are writing what they think is going to be produced. And the Fringe, now if you play your cards right and you get best of Fringe, you can make money going from Fringe to Fringe to Fringe around the country. And so a lot of it is more about the Madonna effect. If you're really good at promotion, you may get ahead further, not because your art is that good. Does that make sense? But what's a critic to do? What's my job? I can't talk about it anymore because it's too much. And so now that I choose, and we don't have assignments, how do you choose? Well, one-man shows, first thing to go. Anything from particular press people, first thing to go. Because I know that 90% of their shows are gonna suck. Anything where a press release is 10 pages long, I don't have time to read it, you're out. You see what I mean? Or if it's a show that's been done, like Midsummer Night's Dream, my God, 7 productions this summer in LA of that show. I mean, apparently nobody got the Midsummer memo.
9 productions.
What am I supposed to do?
9 productions.
What am I supposed to do with all of these shows?
So segueing from the one-person show, John, did you have a question?
Yeah, hi, John Grady, in the vein of self-promotion. Little Pussy over at Theater of Note next week, 2 more shows.
Excellent.
For the entire panel, over your career from critic, from beginning to present, what specifically, if you can hone in on it, has surprised you most about your work?
Do you mean about LA theater in terms of how we experienced it, or how
You
I
as
work?
you as a critic.
Okay. Well, I don't know right off the top of my head. That wouldn't be a question.
Yeah.
I have to think about it.
What has surprised us? Like that's something we didn't expect?
In your process?
Well, I can tell you
something
something interesting, and this sort of relates to Colin's conversation with Stephen Lee Morris in his 10-year comparison. You know, I was here in the 80s writing about theater, and then went back to New York for like 17 years, came back like 5 years ago. And so I wasn't here for the 90s, but there were quite, or the aughts, much of the aughts. But so it was very striking returning to see the landscape, and back in those days, man, the chances, there was a lot of showcase. Actors, for their acting schools, doing probably one piece of theater they would do their entire careers to get agents, and they would try to invite agents, and it was just all dreadful. It was unbelievable. It was the bottom, and the bottom was very low. The top was extraordinarily high. So coming back, the bottom is actually much higher. The acting overall and the craft. That took me by surprise. It was much better. And I have a theory. Because no one does showcase anymore. And I think it's because now, for an actor, the YouTube clip is far more valuable. It's better to have something in the can than, I think that's what agents and casting people are looking at. I mean, if you can get on a viral YouTube clip, you've got it made. You're made in the shade. And there's no reason to do theater. And that I think has been beneficial to the stage here. Because it's separated,
See,
the chat.
the internet's helped out again. Such a cute little thing that. Anybody else? No, any other questions? Come on. Over there? Yes. Richard.
Yeah, I imagine everyone becomes a critic for a reason. And I would also imagine that everybody on the panel there has certain agendas beyond just seeing plays and writing about them, sort of an overreaching idea. And I'm curious, after seeing lots and lots of plays, writing about lots and lots of plays, how has that, like, and I may have missed this at the beginning because I wasn't beginning of the thing, but what sort of is the agenda, what brought you to become a critic? What do you want to do beyond seeing plays? And then how has seeing plays shaped that agenda? And how has the agenda shaped seeing plays?
Got all that?
I stated this earlier, so I'll just say it again. I'm from Los Angeles. I have grown up hearing other people define Los Angeles, people who come here from different states and that sort of thing. And so part of the reason that I got into criticism was to have a voice in the conversation about what defines LA theater, and to that end, what defines LA at large.
Personally, I think I was really spellbound by the mythology of off Broadway and the scene of downtown in the '60s, and part of that mythology is how the Village Voice critic Michael Smith became a champion of that scene at a time when it wasn't being recognized by anyone else in town. It was just considered this sort of subversive beatnik thing that was happening, in the West Village and the East Village, and and out of that, these amazing playwrights emerged, like Sam Shepard and the entire generation of American playwriting, which was it turned out to be, this thing that was the envy of the world, including England, and I thought, God, that is so cool. And I want to be part of a scene like that. And wouldn't it be cool to be someone like Michael Smith, or to discover the next Sam Shepard? And so yeah, I think, and so when the opportunity arose through sheer nepotism, because my friend happened to be Stephen Micklin, who was working at the Weekly in those days, and through a measure of that kind of arrogance and sort of typical postgraduate ignorance. I got into it, and then from that, yes, and then you sort of, I discovered, I got into the Padua playwrights and their whole, who is populated, were populated by people like Murray Mednick and Irene Fornes, who were from the off scene from that period, and their whole approach to, like poets theater. And that became something I believed in, and something which I think became present in the British playwriting renaissance of the 90s, the in-your-face stuff, which I really admire, Sarah Kane and Mark Ravenhill and people like that. And so that became my vision. That's what I think, and a belief in the new play, the original play, as the foundation of a theater scene and its salvation.
My thing is, I think I just got into it, and I think a lot of theater critics get into it this way, is I'm a big theater fan. I love theater, and starting at the Weekly, I was assigned things, and I wasn't, I was just assigned whatever, and so I would see random things that I didn't necessarily know anything about, which was good and bad. You could occasionally be sent to something that was fantastic that you never would have gone to, and you wouldn't even have heard of on your own, and other times you'd see things that weren't so great. But what really shocked me, what surprised me, and I know this is maybe different than Tony feels about it, but I felt like I saw a lot of great stuff. I saw more great stuff or good stuff than I saw terrible stuff. And God knows I saw terrible stuff too, and still do to this day. Even when I pick stuff myself, occasionally you're going to see something you think is going to be great, and guess what? It's not. But per capita, I was amazed how much great stuff there is in LA. And I'm still, I don't feel like I have an agenda necessarily, and I don't feel like I'm doing it to go anywhere else than where I'm already at. But it's to continue to enjoy and engage with that theater, which I think is so rich. And that's my take on it, I guess.
When someone says, why did you choose to be gay? Didn't I accept it? It's kind of the same thing with criticism. I didn't become a critic, I was born a critic. And my brother certainly beat me up for it. But it was more of the same reason I got into directing first, because I think I'm a prodigious noticer, which infuriates some people. I'm like, God, did you see that she's got that thing sticking out of her dress and her stockings? They're like, who cares? But that's what I do. I would have been a detective in another life. I like the little clues and the pieces and piecing it all together and giving the big picture. So when my friend John called me and said, why are you paying for theater? You're a theater whore. Go, just do a review. Well, I had never written one before I started. So that was exactly 3 years ago. But it was a life in the theater, of course, that led to that, and being a natural cynic/critic thing. Where is it leading to now? I don't like playing it safe. And I feel like I'm playing it safe because even though I don't in my reviews, talking about the lack of visionary directing in LA is a lot different than doing it. It's much easier once a director has done their job to sit there and go, well, can't you see now they should have? And had you in that line, did you? So that's where I want to head back into, is to go back into directing. It's what I originally did. And I got out of it like we get out of a lot of things in life. Things got in the way. And I'm seeing now that as a critic, I'm actually honing my directorial skills. Something that I wasn't able to do as a youth because I was so cocky and brash. And that I'm actually using this as a lesson, not just to teach my readers, but to teach myself. And every show that I see, Jeff will tell you, I do a shitload of research. The whole history of it, reviews of when it was first produced, that kind of thing, before I do it. So I want to get back, and especially if I'm not going to get paid, why should I sit in my underwear until 6 o'clock at night? When he's like, oh my God, we've got a half hour to get to the theater, okay, go, and then the next one. This is going to end for me. That's all I know. I can't sit behind the computer all day, I wasn't built for it. So as much as I love doing this, I think it's time to actually put my money where my mouth is and get back involved with theater. That's all.
And we'll be waiting for you.
We've talked about it's going to be like the scene in Airport where someone's got a mace and someone's got a club where that woman will stop being hysterical.
We know you're coming now.
Anybody else want to respond to that one? Yep.
Yeah, it's highly personal, but the idea of when are we nice and when are we bitchy, or cruel or mean or overly salacious. It's a fine balance, and it's way too general a question, but I like wit, but I really hate people slashing things because they think they can, that they can get away with it. And I'm just wondering how the panel feels, not so much about the politically correct ideal. But when you're criticizing, you hate something, at what point does it kind of lean too far in the direction of just being nasty as opposed to being critical in the way that how can I help you? I'm just wondering if anybody can talk about that.
So go ahead.
When I have visceral reactions to something that I see, that usually tells me more about me than it does about the production. So I have to find out what it is, like why is this bothering me so much? And as soon as I can articulate what that is, then I know what the critique is. Because some productions I'm just not the target audience for. And that's not that production's fault, you know? So I'm gonna do the best that I can to be like, okay, this is why I did not connect with this, and be very specific about the reasons. So it's not necessarily being nasty if you take emotion out of it. That's what I do.
My thing is, and I'm not the first person to come up with this, but the idea of you shouldn't say anything in your review that you couldn't say to their face. Which is not to say that it would be at all comfortable to say it to their face, right? But invariably in the LA theater community, if you do this long enough, you will run into these people that you have reviewed before and you've given them some sort of negative review and whatever. And so it helps to not have said something that was horrible, right? But you can do that. You can say, I didn't like this show because such and such a reason. You don't have to say, I didn't like the show because they were talentless and blah, 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 you know. Personally, I feel like that, there is a type of critic that likes to enjoy being witty at the expense of other people. And certainly there are people who enjoy reading those things, and that's fine. But myself, I feel like that's more about the writer's ego, and it's not really serving the audience necessarily, though I guess it serves entertainment value to some degree, and the play. And so myself, that's what I try to do, is I feel like I certainly write, I can write negative reviews all the time. I don't try to do just that, but I try not to be mean. That is a line that I try not to cross.
I think for me it's helpful to recognize that nobody gives a damn whether I liked it or not. You know what I mean? If I didn't like something, that doesn't really take us any farther down the road. And secondly, that if what I'm writing is the end of the conversation, I'm doing something wrong. Do you know what I mean? So if it's that sucked, period, that's not really helping us in any way as a community or as an art form. But if in some way the reasons why I didn't like it is maybe the beginning of a conversation, then maybe there's a reason to write that. I sort of disagree way back from ages ago that there are absolutely things that I go see that I dislike and that there's no reason for me to write about it because I'm not going to contribute to that conversation, you know? And so I think for me it's what comes after what I write. And that might, and that might be for that particular audience or for that artist or whoever.
Do you write about everything you see?
No.
So you're sort of cherry picking.
Absolutely.
That's a cool luxury. and in the sense of having an acid tongue, having only a photo caption like the weekly within which to express your opinion is a luxury because, for example, you've got to pick. And I think the most vulnerable people out there are the actors. They're the ones who are putting their asses on the line, and so I never say bad things about actors because I don't have to, because I just don't have the room. I have to pick and choose. I only say nice things, which is one or two adjectives. It's not much. And so then I sort of save it a little more for the director, and I think I'm nastiest with writers because they're cowering back up in the balcony.
Well, I like that breakdown a lot. There's nothing I like reading more than a really blistering review. Like especially if the targets are kind of big targets. Like there's a lot of excitement about After Earth and a lot of negative criticism. People really went to town, but they really enjoyed breaking out their most negative adjectives for that one. So it's very fun to read it. But when I started seeing the plays, I felt it's so palpable to sit there in front of these people and to see the work that went into it and to see their commitments. A lot of people are working for nothing. They have day jobs and they're going and they're working all night. So it's almost painful to imagine that if I were just like, ooh, this is a really witty, savage review, how hurtful it can be. And so I feel like I have written things that in retrospect I'm like, that how would I feel? And also, before they put up the paywall at the LA Times, I would get a lot of really nasty reader comments. Now they don't happen as much anymore, but they'd be like, "You are the biggest idiot I've ever heard of." Or, "Was this written by a child?" was one of the comments that really stung me. So I thought, if I'm getting stung, these people are getting stung too. So let's pull back the stingers a little.
Maybe the rule of thumb is don't write angry.
Right, or hungry.
I was just. I have some writers, and I don't understand why they're so angry. And I have to cut out things that you can just tell are venomous, that come from a place of, I know I should be practicing in the theater and writing, and I'm not. So I'm going to talk about that, and you can just sniff it out. Fortunately, I've never had a negative thing to say about any actors, so I'm the person to ask. I think you answered the question, wit. Because, and here's the thing about truth. With a capital T. I write like I think. And if I'm watching some guy and he reminds me of Hedda Hopper, I'm going to say so. Because the image in my head is of Hedda Hopper when that guy acts. People say, God, that's so mean. No, it's just feedback. And that's my gift. And if the world doesn't want to hear that, that's why I think it's so important to not go for the, I'm going to destroy you necessarily, but just, hey, this is what it looks like. This is what it sounded like. Why was the sound here? Why? And that's why shows that guy's good and that guy sucks and that scene's good and that scene sucks are mediocrity. And to me, those are the hardest ones to write. Because you don't know whether to uphold it or not.
Well, this has been a gift for us,